Hello, listeners. Welcome to Ithihasa, a Indic history podcast, and you're listening to episode 25 of this season, Vijayanagara. In the last episode, we delved into the different types of temple styles, their components, and gradual evolution of majestic gopuras through the Vijayanagara period, which served as portals to not just a divine experience, but also an assertion of royal power. The ubiquitous nature of gopuras in South Indian temples is the legacy of Vijayanagara Empire, which had revived an architectural art form from the brink of extinction. Next time you visit a Dravidian-style temple, make sure you spend a minute looking at the beautiful gopura in the temple complex as an ode to the rich legacy left behind by our ancestors. In this episode, and the next one too, we will continue with the art and architecture series of the season. Before switching gears, like I said in the last episode, the whole series will be split up across the season. In today's episode, we will explore the art, architecture, and philosophy of Vidyashankara Temple of Sringeri, which was one of the most important temples that were built during the Vijayanagara Empire. The picture that you can see in this episode's cover art in your podcast player is the Vidyashankara Temple that's located in Sringeri, which is in the Chikmagalur district of Karnataka. It stands high on the left bank of the Tunga River. Tunga River, that's born in the Western Ghats and flows through the districts of Chikmagalur and Shimoga, is famous for the sweetness of its water and is considered to be one of the sweetest natural waters in the world. There is a saying which goes like this: Tunga Pana Ganga Snana, which loosely translates to drink the water of Tunga and bathe in the water of Ganga. Vidyashankara Temple is said to have been built in 1338 as a tribute and memorial to the 10th Jagat Guru of the Sringeri Matha, Sri Vidyashankara, who was also known as Sri Vidyatirtha Mahaswami. He had lived from 1229 to 1333. If you remember the finale episode of the Foundation series, A Guru's Grace, it was Vidyatirtha who was the Guru of Vidyaranya. He also happens to be the Guru and predecessor of the 11th Jagat Guru, Bharati Tirtha, who is referred to in the very important Sringeri Taluk inscription dated to 1346 AD, on the occasion of coronation of Harihara I of Sangamas dynasty and the first Vijayanagara ruler. Bharati Tirtha was the brother of Vidyaranya, who goes on to become not only the Rajguru of the Vijayanagara rulers, but also the 12th Jagat Guru of Sringeri Sharda Peetham. Bharati Tirtha and Vidyaranya were the disciples of Sri Vidyashankara or Vidyatirtha Mahaswami. Apart from being an extraordinary scholar, Vidyashankara was a great guru and a visionary who had attained his samadhi in 1333. As per tradition, Vidyashankara's blessings and encouragement to Harihara and Bukka was crucial in giving them the support as well as the impetus to establish a powerful Hindu empire as a strong defense against the Islamic onslaught. The Vidyashankara Temple is built entirely of granite, a material not in much use in that part of Karnataka till then. The plan of the temple is elliptical and has 6 entrances. It looks like 2 semicircles joined by a rectangular block in the center. Though Hindu temples resemble one another in their basic plan and follow the rules laid down by the Shilpa Shastras and Agamas, the geographical differences, the rulers or patrons who built them, the historical influences, and the Sthala Puranas give each one of them its uniqueness. The Vidyashankara Temple is a very interesting piece of Vijayanagara architecture. It has a very unique plan and layout, resulting from a bold and harmonious mixture of styles. While it was built by Vijayanagara founders, but viewed from a distance and at a first glance, it looks very similar to a Hoysala temple. Those who have visited or studied at least a handful of pictures of the Hoysala temples, they would instantly recognize the Vidyashankara temple to be one, and they can be excused for being mistaken. This similarity, or should I say, the Hoysala style that is dominating and bursting out from this temple, is really not an accident. It's very much intentional, and there's a nice explanation for that, which we'll see in this episode. There are few things that this temple's style illustrates clearly. Normally, the construction style of a temple is linked to a particular dynasty or a ruling house. But that wouldn't be entirely accurate, as this temple and many other examples illustrate. Instead, the style of a temple is more closely linked to the prevailing trends, technologies of the period in question, which then influence the construction style. Since trends and traditions don't tend to change overnight with the advent of a new empire or a dynasty, the existing trends and design patterns are instead embraced, then gradually adapted and developed. As time goes, the skills of the artisans and engineers improve by leaps and bounds. Finally, there will come an inflection point when the new replaces the old and becomes the default standard of the age. Let's take the example of Vidyashankara Temple itself. This was clearly built by the first Vijayanagara ruler Harihara I of Sangamas dynasty in 1338 AD, like I indicated earlier. This was 2 years after the unofficial foundation of Vijayanagara Empire. For those who are curious to know why I said unofficial foundation, check out the episodes on Sangamas in the foundation series. Now the question is, why would Harihara build a temple that looks like a Hoysala temple? One of the reasons I already mentioned earlier, which was the obvious prevailing temple styles and trends of the age. Having said that, there's more to it than meets the eye. Harihara I was sending a clear message by building the Vidyashankara temple in a fusion style with heavy influence of Hoysalas. It's important to point out that as of 1338, the Hoysala monarch Veerabhallala III was still alive, and we already saw the interesting relation between him and Sangamas, and we also looked at the role played by Sringeri Matha in legitimizing the Sangamas to wear the mantle of defenders of Sanatana Dharma in the south. When one connects these dots, Harihara was not only showing his reverence to the Sringeri Matha for actively supporting the rise of Sangamas with the help of a social and religious outreach among the masses, but Harihara was also showing his gratitude to the visionary Hoysala monarch Veerabhallala for being an important power behind the political and military rise of Sangamas, in the interest of a larger strategic cause of putting up a fight against the Tughlaqs in South India. We explored this story in one of the Foundation series episodes dedicated to Veerabhallala and the Sangamas. For those who haven't listened to this story, do check out the Blood of the Last Hoysala episode in the Foundation series. Veerabhallala is a fascinating character indeed, and he is one of my favorite characters in this whole season. Now, let me tell you what is the uniqueness of the Hoysala architecture and why I say Vidyashankara Temple was a fusion of Dravida temple building style with Karnataka's regional style that became really prevalent among the artisans in the Hoysala period. As per temple architecture experts Professor Adam Hardy and Dr. Manoj Gundanna, they classify Hoysala architecture as Karnataka Dravida temple style that is unique and distinct from the Tamil style we saw earlier. Having said that, it doesn't mean that the Hoysala architecture has evolved from Dravida style and then went tangential to it. No, that's not the case, and in fact, its temples closely follow the Dravidian architecture. But Hoysala architecture can fool one into thinking like that. It is mostly due to the optical illusion that's created due to the distinct visual patterns created as a result of sharp angles, tight carvings, and the attention to minute details. The temples of Hoysalas are known for their elegance with crisp and intricate carvings. While Hoysalas constructed a lot of temples during their reign, the temples as such weren't huge in size. Instead, these temples had a lot of depth in the embellishments and exquisite carvings that on first sight will look like they were made with modern cutting-edge tooling. Some of the popular features of Hoysala temples are that they were built to a stellate plan, or also known as star pattern plan. Most of the Hoysala temples were built with soft soapstone and very intricately carved with inventive decoration and ornamentation. Majority of the Hoysala temples have a plain covered entrance porch, supported by circular or bell-shaped pillars, which were further carved and molded with decorative motifs. These pillars look like they have been carved using modern lathes. That's how perfect and glossy they look. Hoysala architecture itself had its roots in the Western Chalukyan architecture. Like I explained earlier, no architectural pattern with respect to temples comes out of blue or in overnight. There is always a process of adaptation and evolution taking place. Just like how we saw the simple gopuras of Mahabalipuram evolve into majestic and skyscraping gopurams of Vijayanagara and Madurai. I would like to remind the listeners to check the show notes for the links to the pictures and images of the Vidyashankara temple. That would help the listeners follow through the episode as we go. Looking at the temple, one can see a lower platform, or also called as Upapita, which is about 4 feet high, and it follows the contours of the temple. A Upapita enhances the height of the structure. And if one notices, it is in a classic stellate pattern, or also known as the star pattern. And the star pattern with right angle edges is typical to Hoysala temples. And next, we see 6 sets of 6 steps, all flanked by banisters in the shape of elephant heads and yalis. These steps take one from the ground level to the Adhisthana, which is a real base of a temple. These steps are placed on the east, southeast, southwest, west, northwest, and northeast sides of the temple. The Adhisthana too follows the contours of the temple and is very elaborately embellished in a typical Hoysala tradition. It has 8 highly ornate bands around it. The first band is a lowermost band and is embellished by horses, interrupted occasionally by hooded cobras, camels, and herds of deer. Note the horses and camels. It's interesting that camels would be carved on a South Indian temple. The second band is covered with elephants in various positions, and some panels show angry elephants with huge tusks. The third band has flowers and some bead reliefs. The fourth band consists of lotus flower motifs, a peculiar peacock with a lion's head, as well as the famous Hoysala motif of the legendary Sala killing a lion. Sala was the founder of Hoysalas who slayed a lion single-handedly in a fight with it, in order to save his Jain guru Sudatta. The word Hoysala literally means strike Sala. The word Hoy means to strike in Old Kannada. The fifth band has some monkeys and snakes. The sixth band is the most interesting band, as it has magnificent reliefs of narratives. A long procession of royalty, ending with Ashwamedha Yagna, takes up the whole of the south and southwest sides of the temple. There is also the Kiratarjuniya story that follows Ashwamedha Yagna panels immediately. Kiratarjuniya story is an epic Sanskrit poem written in the 6th century CE that describes the battle between Lord Shiva in the guise of Kirata, which means mountain-dwelling hunter, and Arjuna. The battle between Shiva and Arjuna ends with Shiva being pleased with Arjuna's skill and talent, and he gifts him with the Pashpatastra. Next, we see a panel identified as Adi Shankaracharya and his 4 disciples, followed by yogis and acharyas imparting knowledge. The yogis are in complex yogasanas. The seventh band has some yantras on it, which marks the floor level of the temple, and the final eighth band has a frieze of dancers in various poses, and musicians with instruments such as pipes and drums. The outer wall, or what is called as Bhai Bhitti, is adorned by a series of ornate rectangular columns projecting from the wall, placed at regular intervals. Each of these columns has an inverted lotus pattern below a sort of frame or falaka that have bracket arms, shaped in typical Vijayanagara style. This unique Vijayanagara style of an inverted lotus bud is called Pushpa Podigai. Another fascinating aspect of the temple exterior is the chains of stone rings that are cut off from the same stone and are seen hanging down from the eastern end. This is yet another feat of Vijayanagara workmanship. In between the pairs of rectangular columns I described earlier is a grand array of 61 large sculptures that are framed by Makara Torana arches. Here, Brahma, Vishnu in his the Savtaras, Shiva in various Leela, and Samhara Murti forms are seen. Devi Parvati in all her splendor, along with Lakshmi and Saraswati, add beauty to the external walls. Now coming to the top of the temple, the Shikara rises over the western side in three distinct tiers of circular stories or talas of gradually diminishing height and diameter. In the inside, Nandi, the Vahana of the deity, is installed in the sanctum facing the cardinal points. This is a classic South Indian feature in the temples. Then there is a Sukhanasa, or also it is basically external facing ornamentation structure over the entrance to the Garbhagriha or inner shrine. So one can see the Sukhanasa in a typical Hoysala style, with a rectangular entrance leading to a narrow hollow pathway into the temple. The temple as such has a corrugated roof pattern, which was a necessity even in those days due to the heavy rains that this region experiences. Things get even more interesting in the inside of the temple, from the eastern doorway, which is flanked by Shivadwarapalas, and a distinct change in the style used is noticed. Basically, one moves from a Hoysala influenced exterior to a Tamil Dravida influenced interior. One can enter the Navaranga Mandapa from the southern and northern doors too. The enclosed Mandapa, whose ceiling is divided into 9 squares, has 12 highly ornate pillars of the typical 16th century Vijayanagara temples. Vijayanagara artisans of the 14th century were obsessed about highly decorative pillars with square bases and the ornate Pushpa Podigai corbels on top of them. And this obsession with the pillars that we see in this 14th century Vidyashankara temple becomes a signature of the Vijayanagara Empire, as it goes. One can see sculptures of an elephant with an upraised trunk, a rearing yali with a heroic rider in the middle, and a heavy projecting bracket of elephants, lions, and composite animals are seen on the side of the pillar facing the open inner space. The Yali figure is a mysterious mythological creature seen in many South Indian temples, and these are often used on pillars. It's a hybrid creature portrayed as part lion, part elephant, and a part horse, and Vijayanagara artisans use this figure extensively in their art and architecture. Another interesting thing that displays the amazing skill of Vijayanagara sculptors is the movable stone balls in the mouths of these Yali figures. Each of these Yali pillars bears the image of a sign of the zodiac, and such zodiac sign pillars are a rarity in temples, and even more so on the pillars of temples. These zodiac pillars are arranged in such a way that the early morning rays of the sun fall on one of them in the order of the 12 solar months. And the floor of the mandapa, which is marked by shadow lines, act as a sundial. And the ceiling of mandapa with 9 blocks represents the Navagraha Mandala. In the central square, which is almost 16 feet high, is carved a lotus with a still unopened bud in the center. It also has 4 parrots hanging upside down trying to peck at it. The Garbhagriha of the temple houses the Vidyashankara Linga. 2 additional shrines, both facing the east, are the Vidya Ganapati shrine to the right of the Vidyashankara Linga and the Durga Mahishasura Mardini one to the left. Housed in smaller shrines are the idols of Brahma and his consort Saraswati, then Vishnu and Lakshmi, and Shiva and Parvati. All in all, there are 6 shrines in this temple. Interestingly, though the style on the outside follows the Hoysala style, the finesse or the intricate detailing of the Hoysala sculptures is not attained here. Because this temple has patterns with the walls having number of gaps and projections to provide greater space for decorative carvings and reliefs. And this is not exactly how an Hoysala temple uses its walls. So this is where there is some deviation. This deviation is mostly due to the fact that the material used is a variety of granite, which apart from being hard is also a little flaky. In short, the Vijayanagara architects did not use the same soft soapstone which the Hoysalas always used. Soft soapstone is normally very soft and allowed finer chiseling. So this was the overall architecture of the temple from a design and sculpting perspective. Now let's look at this temple from the perspective of philosophy. Because a Hindu temple is not just a stone and brick structure. It's a form of expression of a philosophy too. It was inevitable that the rich tradition of Indian philosophy would find its way into Indian art and architecture. The Vidyashankara temple, being a tribute to the 10th Sringeri pontiff, reflects the philosophy of Adi Shankaracharya. As per tradition, Adi Shankaracharya is credited with bringing the timely awareness to a fractured Hindu society in the aftermath of the fall of Gupta Empire. For this reason, Shankaracharya's principal teachings, the Panchayatana Puja, the depiction of Shanmatas, and the importance of a guru are the dominant themes of this temple. The Panchayatana Puja, or the worship of the 5 principal deities of Hinduism, namely Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, Ganapati and Surya, was a long established mode of worship. However, the spirit of this mode had been lost due to factionalism, narrow-mindedness and intolerance, which had slowly but surely crept into a fragmented Hindu society. Adi Shankaracharya believed that an exclusive approach to any god could induce avoidable fanaticism. And to deal with this aspect, Shankaracharya reintroduced Panchayatana Puja. He was aware that due to the frailty of human nature, one tends to have a favorite among favorites. Similarly, the concept of an Ishtadevata, a most preferred god amongst all other gods, like the first among equals. So, in this particular mode of worship or puja, the devotee places the most loved deity in the center, without neglecting the other deities who are placed around the central one. And the Vidyashankara temple represents the Shiva Panchayatana. In the Garbhagriha is the Vidyashankara Linga representing Shiva. Vidya Ganapati represents the Ganapatya Shakha or school. Lakshmi Narayana, the Vaishnava tradition. Durga Mahishasura Mardini, the Shakta tradition. And the lotus carved on the ceiling representing the Saurya tradition. So in this temple, the other 4 gods of the Panchayatana are placed around Shiva, who is the most favored deity here. Now let's try to understand the depiction of Shanmatas in the temple. The Adi Shankaracharya was also called the Shanmata Sthapanacharya. Although he propagated Advaita Vedanta, the doctrine of formless, nameless, traitless, omnipresent Brahman, he understood and appreciated the limitations of ordinary people and their need to devote themselves to God in any form, by means of devotion or bhakti. To this end, he reorganized Hindu religious worship into 6 schools: Ganapatyam, Shaivam, Vaishnavam, Shaktam, Sauram, and Kaumaram. Kaumaram means Kumara or Kartikeya. Kumara or Kartikeya are also known as Kanda. And Kartikeya was not an important deity in the Vedic times and was not represented in the Panchayatana mode of worship. But in South India, this deity was highly popular. It is believed that Adi Shankaracharya, acknowledging this sect of Kartikeya worshippers, embraced them and recognized the Kaumaram as an important school of worship. So in this lovely temple, we see all the Shanmathas represented in a most pleasing manner, in the form of narrative decorations and sculptures at various places inside and outside. The representation of God Brahma, and especially on the Adhisthana on the sixth panel, are seen. Guru's teaching and Adi Shankaracharya too with 4 disciples is depicted here. A life of duty, devotion and learning seems to be the motif in these panels. To conclude, this temple is a very interesting piece of Vijayanagara art and architecture. It has a unique plan and layout brought about by a bold and harmonious mixture of styles, mainly the Hoysala and the Vijayanagara Dravidian ones. As rivers, big and small, meet at a confluence to flow on, making their meeting place holy and venerable, the patrons of this temple too have aesthetically and skillfully integrated different concepts of philosophy and styles of art and architecture to produce a beautiful structure that reflects the legacy of the Vijayanagara emperors and the acharyas of the Sringeri Matha, who implemented in their thoughts and deeds the lesson of unity and diversity. With this, we will end this episode, which was the second installment of our Art, Literature and Architecture series. I sincerely hope the listeners enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review, wherever it is that you're listening. A huge thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. I hope to see you soon in the next episode. Till then, this is Narendra Vikram, your host and narrator, signing off. Hope you have a great week ahead.